Something I listened to recently was All In did an interview with the Treasury Secretary.
Oh, yeah, I
I'm like
listened
three
to
quarters
that
of the way
today.
in, and
It was
it's
good.
pretty good. Like
It was good.
it's an hour with the guy, so instead of a 6-minute clip, you actually get to hear him.
That sounds so boring.
No,
Oh,
they're,
no,
they're
it's
actually
juicy.
very. I think they're very good interviewers.
Yeah.
I remember their old pods with RFK and
Yeah.
Didn't they do one with Donald?
Yeah.
Like they're very good at
Yeah.
this.
So something from their most recent episode.
I love this account, Autism Capital.
Yeah. So let's
Hold's
play
net
this from the
worth is in
start.
their home. Only 10% of their net worth is in owning the S&P
Is that Andrew
500
Schultz?
in index funds or whatever in their retirement accounts. And so by creating this American dream around housing and allowing the federal government to provide loans on housing, we've increased the cost of housing. We've created a very destructive housing bubble in the sense that it has reduced people's exposure to participation in productive value creation.
Yeah.
And that's through the ownership of businesses. Instead, we've stored our net worth in a house. And in order to keep the economy and the social structure stable, we've created policies that allow the continuation of the growth in the value of houses so people feel like their net worth is incrementing. And
You're
that's
100% right.
And that's
100%
unfortunately very
They restricted
unnatural.
making new housing.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the main asset. We have
Yeah.
to protect it.
So you may not have heard that first part, but he said 60% of middle class households' net worth is in their home. And yeah, I just want to see what do you guys think about it? Like, I mean, I tend to agree with him. Like I've mentioned before, I don't think it's like a good investment. I did look at the trailing 30-year return of your primary like residence versus the S&P 500, and it looks like average annual return from your primary residence is 3.8%. Now, the last 5 years have been an exception. It's gone up 50% in just the last 4 years. What is that, 10, 15% a year? So definitely an exception. And the S&P 500 the last 30 years has been about 9.6%.
Yeah, stocks crush real
Yeah.
estate.
Does that factor in the leverage?
No. Well,
No.
it's not apples to apples because you're not 5x levering your S&P.
I thought about that. Like, I don't think you
With
you
20% down.
I don't know if you want
That's the best
to
part.
put
Yeah.
the leverage.
I
You
think-
have to factor in the
No,
leverage
you have
because
to.
you're getting 5-to-1 on your capital when you buy.
Yeah.
it.
Exactly. So it's not apples to apples. I think the only way to measure this is like looking at stocks unlevered and real estate levered because you can.
So then in that case, it beats it. It beats the S&P 500.
I mean,
It doesn't.
maybe
No,
you got to factor in the cost of the leverage.
it doesn't. I mean, I have charts going back
He's got
100 plus years that include gold, that include like all the asset classes, and stocks win. I mean, and the reason is simple. Because people forget what stocks are. Stocks are businesses. Businesses are productive assets that exist to make money. And when businesses make money, they return that to the owners. Owners are shareholders. So stocks end up making more money than like non-productive assets.
Yeah. The problem
Even
with
if they're
housing is that
propped up.
people want it to both be like an asset and a commodity. They want it to be cheap and affordable, but they also want it to like go up and make them rich. And it's like you can't do both of those things. Like you can't have something be like abundant and cheap and affordable, and then also like go up in price, because to go up in price like would imply like some modicum of like scarcity, right?
Yeah.
So like we have to pick a lane.
Yeah.
And I think the lane of like making housing like a commodity is the better lane, right? Like there's no real reason why everybody should like have like a ton of their long-term value growth like locked up in like the fate of their house. It doesn't
agree.
doesn't make any sense. You know, we get to turn, but like, how do you go back from that? You can't like just be like, okay, we're just gonna systematically devalue everybody's homes by doing X, Y, Z.
So what could you do? Like, what if you just like increase the supply?
I mean, they're doing that
You
in
do
some
have
cities
to
in
just do
Texas,
that,
right?
yeah.
That's the answer. Increase the supply.
And you can do it in a way where it's like you build sort of like a different tranche of housing, like an affordable type of home, and then like I think that kind of like maintains the scarcity.
I think it kind of happens naturally though. Like I see in some of the apartment complexes we've invested in, they're like, they call it workplace housing, which is just like it's around where the jobs are, and it's meant the rents are in relation to the types of jobs that are there. Like they make sure that they're affordable for the types of incomes that are there. So that kind of happens naturally. I think the hard part of it is like it's all distributed regulations, right? These are all like local and state regulations that hold us back. So you can't have a president come in here and like magic wand it and be like all of a sudden more housing. you have to have all the individual.
So
counties.
what do you mean by that? That's like it's like county zoning laws
Yeah,
typically.
Totally. Like even in Palisades, for example, we heard about that. They have their own zoning issues because they're near the coast.
But even in the interview, like Besant was talking about how in Greenwich, Connecticut, like they have a bunch of affordable housing because there's a statewide law that basically says like if you don't do XYZ at the county level, then people can go over your head and come to the state, and so there's like this check on the local authorities that kind of forces like so it is possible to do it at the state level. I think some states can just choose to be affordable states to live in. I mean, it's already happening.
So Greenwich, Connecticut is like a really rich area, right?
Oh yeah, like mega rich. That's like where all the hedge fund.
Okay, so all the hedge funders have these like mega mansions, but then there's like affordable housing like mixed in with that, or
Yeah, there's a ton of housing in Greenwich that isn't like 100-acre horse farms.
it seems weird. I've never even been there. So is it like copacetic or like?
I've been there. It's nice, but it's like
Super
there
nice.
is like a kind of normal looking town there, aside from all the places where you just roll up and there's just people playing polo and shit.
Well, I mean, I do have some experience with this. Like Jackson Hole, Wyoming, where my parents live, is like faced with this conundrum of like 100-acre ranches, and then you need like service workers. Like you
Right.
need housing for the people who work at the restaurants and stuff.
Right.
And it's like
That's super common in these like rich mountain towns.
it's like a problem that they're constantly trying to solve.
So Max says something that similar to what Steven said. He says factoring in utility though, stocks have zero utility pretty much. Home has utility. I mean, I'd argue that most investments don't really have utility in that you use them.
Utility in the same way your car has utility.
But I think like, and you probably put cars in this bucket, but I think a house is like a consumable product that you consume. It's not necessarily like a good investment vehicle. You could argue it's not an investment vehicle at all, but it's definitely not a good one.
Right. That's why it's probably like more of a commodity than it is an investment. Honestly, it's like it is like this consumable.
It's like any product, like your car.
I'm thinking it was like corn.
It literally falls apart over time, and you have to like pay taxes on it like year after year whenever even if you don't sell it. Like it's got like all the hallmarks of that, right? So I don't know. It's kind of hard to go back on it. But you mentioned the best interview, and like the most interesting part of that interview is when he was talking about the strategic reserve and like why we have a strategic reserve, and it kind of wraps into because I listened to this Friedberg interview too. And like one of the most painful parts of the Friedberg interview was when he talks about how I remember this discussion, like I think it was under the Bush administration, like Republicans were talking about putting like investing Social Security in the stock market. Is that what they meant by like privatizing it?
Probably.
Which sounds a lot worse than like, hey, what if we invest everybody's money in the stock market?
In Solyndra or
bro. And he said the math was such that like had we done that, like we would have like
7 times
as much money, and there'd be no problems with Social
Yeah,
Security.
his argument was that we created this nation fund. What is it called again? What does Saudi Arabia have?
The sovereign wealth.
Sorry, the sovereign wealth fund. But he's like, Social Security could have been that because we could have a massive surplus, and then you use that surplus to buy assets on behalf of the American people, and it continues to like build up in the Social Security fund. And
does it exist like that? Help me understand how Social Security works. Because we all pay taxes into it. Like business owners pay taxes into the Social Security,
right?
And then they probably like immediately need to pay that out. It's not like an insurance company that has a float that can be invested over time.
No, it's a Ponzi scheme.
It's a Ponzi.
That's running at it's running at a deficit.
Definitionally a Ponzi.
Like you or your kids probably won't have any money left unless there won't be any Social Security funds unless they do something. But there's no risk in doing what he mentioned because in either case they're just going to print more money. You're going to print more money now to fund the liability. You're not going to let old people.
I also think if you're going to run a Ponzi, there's no better way than to like invest in your own assets, sort of ensuring that they go higher.
What do you guys like better, investing Social Security assets in the stock market, or what we've talked, I don't know, it's probably like 2 or 3 years ago, but doing like a reverse Social Security. So at birth, you get money that gets invested in the S&P 500. You can't access it until you're, 21 or whatever. And you're kind of like bought in from the beginning as a citizen into the like beautiful thing that can be capitalism.
I think the way
equity, American equity, baby.
The way that it works best is if you do both simultaneously.
Yeah.
Because then you give the babies stocks, but then you push the value of stocks up perpetually.
Right.
Is this something that's not being priced into the market? Like the fact that like we might just like have the U.S. government just bidding stocks for forever from
That'd be
at some point
glorious.
in the future. I mean, that'd be
Imagine like
wild.
the poor like companies that are not included in the S&P 500 because we're only going to bid that one.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, the Vanguard 401k machine does that kind of for us now,
Right.
right?
It's a whole nother ball game with this behind it, though.
Yeah.
I mean, that's crazy. The other interesting part of the interview is like when he was talking about the idea of like why have a sovereign wealth fund, and he was framing it as like, well, we could use the money and just pay down the debt, but like I think we could get a higher return by investing it, which in the long run, right? Because he's like, oh, the interest we have to pay down is 4.2%. So if we can get a higher return than 4.2, which I think we can get, why not do that? And it was just this like interesting approach that like I hadn't heard anybody talk about in a long time, where it's just like, hey, we got this like really, really bad problem. So option one, austerity, everybody kills
Yeah,
everybody
we
with
die. We
pitchforks. We die, right? Option two, we print all the money. Basically still ends with everybody dying.
Yeah.
Option three, where it's just like turn the U.S. into a massive hedge fund, grow it like 20% a year, just and pay down all the debt.
This is like-
at least we're trying that
Like
way.
this is like the realistic grow your way out of it, honestly. I think this is like how you actually take care of the debt problem.
Yeah, and like I'm glad that we have people in government thinking like that now, because that like I'm like, oh, good, we're like thinking of creative solutions to problems that are like not going away. And then you contrast with the people who are like, no, don't invest Social Security in the stock market, which has to be one of the dumbest fucking ideas like of all time.
I said like this is the way you grow your way out of it. I don't think it's a good idea. I think it's our only idea left, is what I'm trying to say. It's not a good idea. You don't want to turn America into a hedge fund. That's not like the purpose of America. But the alternatives are what Steven described.
I think it's a great idea. Like if you have the ability to basically like return, like have capital, then return that capital, like have a return that's far in excess of like your cost of capital, then you just can like just build like a big cushion all the time, right? And it's like the other thing that in this interview is like they were basically like, why not invest it in stocks? If it all goes wrong, you're just going to print money, but we're going to print the money anyway. So why not like give yourself an out where you don't have to print the money?
It's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy too. I mean, if they put that amount of money behind it,
yeah, you
it will go
ensure
up.
victory on the strategy.
it is literally self-fulfilling.